Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a hidden biological threat that might be quietly thriving in your home right now. There's a really common assumption out there about how to find mold, and frankly, it's fundamentally flawed. So we're going to break down exactly why DIY mold inspections almost always fail, and why relying purely on what you can see might just be the most dangerous mistake you can make for your property. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You catch a whiff of a musty smell in the hallway, or maybe spot a weird, discolored patch under a window. Naturally, you want answers, but you don't want to spend a fortune, right? So you run to the local hardware store and grab a DIY mold test kit for, maybe 15 to 40 bucks. It feels like a really smart, proactive move. But we have to ask, is a cheap piece of plastic from the hardware store really enough to protect a home from a complex, hidden biological threat? Section 1. The DIY mold illusion. Look, poking around moisture-prone areas yourself is a great start. If you're checking the caulking or sniffing around under the sink, you're doing solid basic maintenance. But it is so important to realize that's just a surface-level survey. It is absolutely not a true inspection. The core of a DIY inspection is usually that classic Petri dish test. You take the dish, you leave it open in a room for 48 hours to catch ambient spores, you seal it up, and you wait to see what grows. Seems scientific enough, right? But there is a massive flaw here. Mold spores are naturally everywhere. We breathe them outside literally every single day. So of course something is going to land in that dish and start growing. So the crucial point is this. According to the CDC, there are actually no established federal standards for acceptable indoor mold spore counts. Since mold spores are just a completely natural part of our environment, a positive result from a fuzzy Petri dish sitting open on your coffee table doesn't automatically mean you have an infestation. Without a professional reference point, a positive Petri dish result means almost nothing. It's just data without any context. To really understand what's going on with your indoor air quality, you can't just look at it in a vacuum. A DIY kit only captures isolated data from one single moment. Contrast that with the professional standard. When certified inspectors test air quality, they don't just test the inside, they take an outdoor baseline sample at the exact same time. That is how you pinpoint true abnormalities. If your indoor sample is, say, 3 times higher than the outdoor baseline, well, now you have actionable, definitive data. A Petri dish just can't give you that. Section 2. The science of spores and hidden threats. What's truly wild is the sheer environmental pressures some of our homes are under. Take the Tampa Bay area, for example. The average relative humidity there sits above 74% year-round, and it regularly pushes past 90% in the summer. At that level of sustained moisture, mold doesn't even need a leaky pipe to get going. It thrives on condensation alone. If your home's indoor humidity creeps past 60%, the environment is totally ripe for growth, even if everything looks perfectly dry to the naked eye. And when a water event does happen, we're talking hurricanes, severe storms, or just a burst pipe, time is incredibly short. The EPA notes that it only takes 24 to 48 hours for mold to begin growing on wet building materials. That clock starts ticking immediately. By the time you get around to a DIY test a week after a storm, active colonies could already be aggressively established in places you can't even see. Which brings us to the most terrifying part of this whole thing, where the mold actually hides. The mold you can see, that's rarely the mold doing the most damage. Serious infestations start completely out of reach. They're hiding out in HVAC air handlers, squeezed between floor joists, behind your shower. Actually, scratch that. It's not just behind your shower, it's deep inside interior wall cavities and transition zones where different materials meet. A DIY kit on your kitchen counter is definitely not going to detect a colony trapped behind drywall. Plus, trying to uncover this hidden mold yourself can be incredibly dangerous. If you start poking around damp wall cavities, pulling back carpets, or moving insulation to play detective, you risk releasing a concentrated burst of spores right into your breathing air. Certain species, like Stachybotrys chartarum, which you probably know as black mold, produce mycotoxins that trigger serious respiratory responses. If you are ever doing a visual check of a suspected area, you need to be wearing an N95 respirator mask. No exceptions. Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. Professional versus DIY inspections. A certified professional doesn't just glance around and drop a Petri dish. They use a highly concrete, scientific methodology. It starts with a comprehensive visual walkthrough, sure, but then it elevates to thermal imaging. After that, they do volumetric air testing using specialized calibrated pumps, and it all culminates in a certified, legally recognized report. It's a multi-layered approach designed to find the mold exactly where it lives. And the thermal imaging part? It's literally a game changer.
Professional inspectors use infrared cameras to detect temperature differentials on your walls and ceilings. Because moisture causes evaporative cooling, water trapped inside a wall shows up as a distinctly cooler zone on the camera. Think about that for a second. A wall might feel bone dry to your hand, but the thermal camera reveals a hidden pocket of moisture inside the cavity, just waiting to become a massive mold colony.
And this brilliantly illustrates the value of a regulated professional industry. In high-risk areas, consumer protection is absolutely paramount. Take Florida Statute 468, for instance. It actually prevents the company that performs your mold assessment from legally being the same company that does the remediation in most cases. It's designed to prevent inflated findings. It ensures that when you pay for an assessment, the report is completely unbiased and focused entirely on the truth of your home's condition. Section 4. Making the right call.
So when can you handle it and when do you need help? The golden rule of thumb comes straight from the EPA, 10 square feet. If you have an isolated patch of visible surface mold, like, a bit of mildew on your bathroom grout, and it covers less than 10 square feet, homeowner self-remediation is usually perfectly fine. You can clean it up yourself, assuming you've actually fixed whatever moisture source caused it in the first place.
But let's look at this matrix, because there are absolute red flags where calling a professional is the only responsible move. Surface mold under 10 square feet, DIY cleaning for sure. But if you have unexplained musty smells and just can't find the source, call a pro. Have you had a flood, a roof leak, or a burst pipe in the last 30 days? Call a pro. Is your HVAC system blowing out musty air or showing visible dust? Call a pro. Those are signs of hidden, systemic issues, and a sponge and a bucket just aren't going to cut it.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Calling a professional sounds expensive. And yes, an assessment from a licensed inspector typically runs between $350 and $600. But let's look at the big picture here. Missing an active hidden mold colony for 6 months because a $20 DIY kit gave you a false sense of security? That is going to cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands, in structural remediation down the line. Catching it early with a pro is an investment that ultimately saves you a massive amount of money.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. We've seen how basic visual checks and over-the-counter kits are just totally unequipped to handle the reality of how mold thrives. So I want to leave you with this to consider about your own home. If DIY kits only test the air you can see, what is quietly growing in the walls you can't? Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and don't let what's hidden compromise your home.